That was then, this is now, chapter 2. The next afternoon after school, Mark and me went downtown to the hospital to see my mother. She had just had a big operation, one that cost a lot of money. We had sold our car, an old Chevy, our TV, a little black and white job, and anything else we could find to sell, but we were still short of money. I had been trying for weeks to find a job. Mark scrounged around and came up with some money. I didn't ask him where he got it, and he didn't tell me, so I figured he stole it somewhere. Mark was really bad about stealing things. He stole things and sold them, or stole them and kept them, or stole things and gave them away. It didn't bother me. He was too smart to get caught. He had always been stealing things since he was 6 years old. I wasn't above taking a pack of cigarettes from a drugstore, but that was about it. I was the hustler, and Mark was the thief. We were a great pair. One thing about it, though, Mark couldn't see anything wrong with stealing stuff. I could. It didn't much matter to me whether or not Mark was a thief, but I still felt that stealing was wrong. At least it's against the law. I think Mark was only dimly aware of that fact. Stealing was a game to him, something to do for fun and profit, and he was careful not to get caught because that was one of the rules. So that was how we lived, stealing stuff and selling stuff, trying to save money and eat at the same time. I never thought about it then, but I can see now that it was a pretty rough time for us. Anyway, Mark and I hitched a ride almost all the way to the hospital. The guy who gave us a ride was a hippie with long hair and a beard and a Volkswagen bus. Those buses are very big with hippies. I don't know why. The guy said his name was Randy and that he went to college in town, majoring in English. I figured he was a pretty brave guy. Mark and I looked like tough guys, the kind who go around jumping hippies, which we had done once before. We had gone over to the city park where the hippies hang out just to beat up somebody. I wouldn't do it again though. I hadn't realized those guys refused to fight back. And what happened to the one we got hold of, it made me sick. Mark felt the same way. So after that, we left them alone. Randy was telling us about this really cool house where a bunch of his friends lived, and an old house they all rented, and everybody who wanted could live there and groove in peace and goodwill. I didn't much believe him. There had to be a few sponges in a setup like that. And living with a bunch of people would get on my nerves, especially if they were hairy and dirty. But I was polite and said, sounds cool, even though it didn't particularly appeal to me. Mark was interested, though, and asked Randy all kinds of questions about where this place was and who all lived there and if he knew about other places like that. Mark was interested in lots of things. He knew all about the Old West and was nutty about Warner Brothers cartoons, so it didn't bug me when he got all excited about hippie living. When we got out of the bus, Randy held up two fingers and said peace. And Mark held up Eminem's peace medal, which he was wearing around his neck as a joke, and made a wisecrack. Then we looked at each other and cracked up laughing. But we weren't being hateful, it was just funny. Mom was glad to see us, but she hadn't been lacking company. We had the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everybody else's business, and all the ladies came up to see her at least two a day. They also brought me and Mark junk like pies and potato salad. I got the pies, and Mark took whatever else there was, since he couldn't stand sweet stuff. Cokes and an occasional M&M just to be polite to M&M was as much sweet stuff as he'd take. As a result, I was putting on weight. I wasn't in much danger of getting fat since it seemed like I was growing an inch taller a week, and Mark was staying as slight and slender as ever. You'd never guess Mark was as strong as he was by looking at him, but I knew from our wrestling matches that he was as tough as a piece of leather. As usual, the last thing on Mom's mind was herself. We had no more than got there and got hugged when she started telling us about this poor kid across the hall who never had anybody visiting him. How do you know that? I asked. There's so many people coming and going around here. How do you know about some kid across the hall? The nurse told me. Poor kid. He's not any older than you and Mark. It figured. I mean, her finding out about it, if there was a lame dog within 3 miles, she'd find it. It didn't bug me much, though. Thanks to her, I had a brother. Brian, promise me you'll go over and see him. I frowned. Look, I don't know the guy. I'm not going to just walk in and say, hi there, want a visitor? My mother tells me you don't have any. Brian, Mom said, just go talk to him. He won't talk much to the nurses. He's been hurt pretty badly, poor thing. I'll go see him, Mark said. Brian'll come with me. I gave him a dirty look, but he continued. Who knows? Maybe one of us will end up in the hospital sometime with nobody to come and see us. That was just the kind of junk my mother eats up, and Mark knew it. When we left, I stopped him in the hall. What's the idea of telling her you were going to go see that kid? Mark shrugged. I am going to. Why not? This was typical of Mark, as it wasn't typical of anyone else. Well, I'm not going. I'm going down to the snack bar here and get a burger. Ain't you hungry? Mark shook his head. Nah, I'll meet you down there later. I took the elevator to the basement where the snack bar was. I sat on a stool at the counter. After sitting at the bar at Charlie's, I had got used to it, reading the menu over and over, thinking about all the food I'd get if I could. I love to eat. I could put away more food than anyone I knew. I was 5'10" at 16 and still growing, but I went through my lanky period at 14 and had a good build, of which I was proud. I should have gone out for football, I guess, but it didn't much appeal to me. I like neighborhood football games, but all that practice for the real thing seemed like a bore to me. Besides, I knew I couldn't put up with the coach telling me how to play. I never have been able to accept authority. I don't know why. I figure it was because of this cop. These two cops who beat me up once when I was 13 years old. I had gone to the movies with these other guys. I forget where Mark was. And we drank a fifth of cherry vodka and Coke and got drunk. That stuff tasted terrible, but I was a dumb kid and I drank it just to show I was as super tough as the rest of them. When the movie was over and I was staggering around alone on the streets in the dark, these two cops picked me up, drove me out to a hill on the other side of town, slapped me around, and left me there. I never forgot it. It didn't stop me from drinking, but it sure ruined any respect I ever had for cops. Yeah, sure, there are good cops somewhere. I just never met any. Ever since then, I've made it a point to mouth off to cops. It's probably why I never met any good ones. So, I was sitting there reading the menu when I heard a voice say, Can I take your order? And I looked up at this really cute chick. She gave me a big smile and said, Hi, Brian. What are you doing here? I was racking my brain trying to think where I knew her from. She did seem kind of familiar, so to stall for time, I said, I'm here to see my old lady. She's just getting over an operation. I didn't know you worked here. I just started this week. But you knew I just got back, didn't you? Oh, yeah, I said, about to go crazy trying to remember who she was. She had this groovy long dark hair with the sheen to it like charcoal. Long hair with bangs just drives me crazy. There aren't too many chicks who can wear their hair like that and still look good. And she had these big, beautiful gray eyes, dark gray with black eyelashes, and the eyelashes were really long, but they weren't fake. I am a long practiced studier of girls, and I can tell about things like that. Gosh, you've grown, she said. You must be a foot taller than when I last saw you. Yeah, well, it's been a long time, I said. If I had grown a foot, it must have been. How you been doing? Oh, pretty good. I was lucky to get this job. Listen, give me your order. I'm not supposed to stand around talking to the customers. Sure, I'll have a hamburger and a Pepsi. She took my order and left, and I was about to lose my mind. She couldn't have been someone I had dated. I did a lot of girls, but I was sure I could remember them if I saw them again. Anyway, she seemed friendly, and after you break up with someone, she's not usually friendly. She seemed so familiar, I could have sworn I'd seen her recently. Whoever she was, I wanted to see her again. I had already noted that she wasn't wearing a boy's ring around her neck, or any other sign that she was somebody's personal property. I'm in the habit of looking for things like that. I have gotten into some tight spots with boyfriends I didn't even know existed. Here's your hamburger. I looked up at her and she gave me this really great smile, a smile that lit up her face. I knew I'd seen that smile recently and then it struck me who it was. And I was so surprised that I said it out loud. Kathy. Yeah, she said, almost as surprised as I was. Who'd you think it was? The last time I saw you, you had short hair and braces, I said, forgetting that a lady killer should never remind a girl of her gawky age when she was skinny and ugly, or fat and ugly, or short haired with a mouthful of metal. Yeah, that's the truth. Brian, you mean you didn't recognize me? No, I didn't. I couldn't see why that should shock her so much. Even back in the days of braces and short hair, we weren't exactly best friends. I had never paid any attention to her. I just recognized you because you look so much like Eminem when you smile. I am going to take that as a compliment, she said, giving me my check. Eminem is a beautiful child, and he has a beautiful smile to match his mine. He's a good kid, I agreed. She turned to go, and I said, wait, without thinking, so when she turned, I stuttered a little. I mean, I haven't seen you in a while. I'd like to talk to you sometime. I really wasn't living up to my self image. I never stutter. All right, she said. We'll talk sometime. I wanted to ask when, but didn't. You should never be too eager with chicks. It gives them ideas. I waited around for Mark, but he didn't show up, so I took the elevator back to Mom's floor. I went and looked in the room across from Mom's where that kid was supposed to be. I saw him all right, but no sign of Mark. That kid had been hurt bad. He had bandages around his head and across one eye, both arms in slings, and stitches in his lower lip. Hey, are you Brian? He looked at me out of his good eye. Mark said to wait for him here. He'll be right back. He went across the street to the drugstore to buy me some comics. I could tell from the way he talked that he came from a neighborhood like mine. This was likely. It was a charity hospital. Come on in, he said. Pull up a chair. I did. I didn't know what to say to him. You're Mark's brother? You don't look much alike. For a minute, I really felt good about Mark's telling this guy we were brothers. Of course, we didn't look alike. Mark with his gold hair and strange gold eyes and slight, tense body, and me, big and husky with dark brown hair and eyes. So I said, no, I guess we don't. I got a brother, older. We don't look much alike either. I looked around for a no smoking sign. Can I smoke in here? Sure, as long as you don't get caught. Would you mind giving me a few puffs? Okay, I said. I lit up a cigarette and put it between his lips. When I took it back, he said, thanks. I haven't had a cigarette in a week. My name's Mike Chambers. Mine's Brian Douglas. Man, you look awful. What happened? I asked. I was beginning to be glad I had come in after all. It must have been rough, being kept in a hospital that gave you the creeps with nobody to talk to. I got beat up, he said with a wry smile. I couldn't believe it. I thought he'd been in a car wreck or something. What does the other guy look like? I said finally. It's a long story, Mike said. You got time for a long story? Sure, I said. I really do like listening to stuff that's happened to other people. I guess that's why I like to read. Well, if it seems like I'm never going to shut up, just tell me. You and Mark are the first people I've talked to in a long time. There ain't much to say to these nurses. I could see that. What can you say to nurses? Well, Mike began. I always had this soft spot for chicks. I was always making like Sir Galahad, opening doors for them and complimenting even the homely ones. And I beat out a lot of guys better looking than me and never could figure out why. But it wasn't just a line with me. I guess I'm a sucker. I've been taken a few times, like loaning money to chicks who came on with the sob story. But I'll always believe the best out of a girl until I'm proved wrong, which is my own hang up. That explains the way I acted that night the gang and me was hanging around the drugstore and this black chick came in to buy some cigarettes. Me? I just see a nice looking chick with really beautiful eyes, all black and inky soft. I guess I'm a little funny that way because Negroes just don't get me all upset. I mean, I can see a black guy and a white chick together and it sure don't bother me, while most white guys can't stand to see that. Like the gang. The minute she walks in, they get all tensed up because black anyone, chick or otherwise, just don't happen to come around much where I live. I guess she worked downtown and got off late and just stopped in on her way to the bus stop. I think she told me that later. I don't remember too good now. So she gets her cigarettes and starts for the door when a couple of guys block her way. Now, the gang I hang with is a pretty good bunch of guys. A lot of heart and only a couple of wise apples in the group. But see, nothing much had been happening and they were bored. So they start picking on the chick, calling her Black Beauty and some other choice things. They were really getting rude, and I was feeling sorry for the girl. She kept her eyes down and just said, let me by, please, real soft like. The guys started pushing her around. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to scare her plenty. She just gripped her purse with both hands and tensed all over like she was trying to keep from running, which was pretty smart. Running is just an invitation to be chased. And if she got caught, it wouldn't be in a lighted drugstore. The old guy who runs the drugstore had disappeared. He was scared silly of the gang. I don't know why. We never done anything to him. When one of the guys grabbed hold of her and really got crude, I got fed up. I went over and said, "Let her go," like I meant it. They all looked at me for a while, like they were trying to make up their minds whether or not to jump me. We don't usually go around beating each other up, but it has happened. They finally decided not to. My big brother, he's got a pretty big rep as a tough guy in our neighborhood. He's in jail now. That's why he don't come to see me. It was his rep and not mine that stopped them because I ain't never been known as a tough guy. So they turned her loose and went back to reading comics, and I followed the girl outside. She was looking up and down the street, kind of desperate like, and I knew she missed her bus. I said, "Hey, girl, if you've missed your bus, I can give you a ride home." She just kept her eyes down. Finally, she said something, but brother, I'm not going to repeat it. I saw then and there she thought I had evil intentions. I don't blame her. Hell, if I'd had to take what she just did, I'd be sore and suspicious too. I said, "Look, I don't want to pick up or anything." She gave me a funny look, so I added quick, "Not that you're not real cute or anything. I mean, you'll have to stay here another hour to catch the next bus, and I'll be leaving, and I don't know what those guys might do." She saw the logic in that because it was getting dark. Not too many cops come around that area. It's kind of a deserted street. You know how cops are. There's a million over on the ribbon making sure the nice kids don't kill each other or run each other down while we can cut each other's throats, and they don't give a damn. Finally, she said she'd let me drive her home. I had my old Ford parked on the drugstore parking lot. It was really my brother's car, but he said I could drive it any time he got busted, which is often. He's a pretty good guy, but if you've got a rep for fighting, somebody's always trying to take you on. The last time that happened, my brother busted a bottle over this guy's head and got charged with assault with a dangerous weapon. He never used weapons before, but he had finally got fed up with the whole routine. It wasn't his first offense, so they sat on him kind of hard. Anyway, we get into my Ford, and I can see the poor kid is still scared. She sits hugging the door on her side like she's going to jump out any second. I got a couple of good looks at her. She was real slender, looked like she sort of swayed in the wind, and her hair was down to her shoulders, and it must have been straightened. She had on a yellow dress and yellow shoes, and she had her straw purse sitting in her lap. She held onto it with one hand and the door handle with the other. She really was cute. I started talking to her about just everything. Would her old lady chew her out because she was late? My old lady did. Man, they never liked anything you did they? But still, sometimes you couldn't get along without them. Did she go to school? I did, but boy, it was really a hell of a place to spend all day. I wanted to drop out, but the old lady said she'd kill me if I did. I kept talking because that's what I do with animals when they're hurt and scared, and pretty soon they get over being scared. I've got a hang up with animals too. I could tell she was beginning to calm down a little. At least she let go of the door handle. I even got her to smile once. I forgot what I'd been saying. And then I said, "I'm sorry about what happened to you back there." And suddenly she started crying. Man, that got me so shook. Nothing gets me shook like chicks crying. Mike stopped here, and I gave him another drag of my cigarette. "That's funny," I said. "Chicks crying bore me." "Go on, Mike, finish your story." Well, I didn't know what to say to her. I finally said, "Hey, don't cry," which never does any good. She kept on sobbing, and now and then I'd catch a word or two. I got the idea that she was fed up with getting walked on all over by white people. I could see that. I get fed up when getting walked over by the fuzz, teachers, my old man, and the upper class kids at school. So I could see that. "Brian, do you know that my old man keeps my mother from coming to see me? Said I was a dumb kid for ever getting into this hospital." So anyway, this chick, she tells me about her problems. And she uses some pretty bad language, but nothing I ain't heard before from white chicks. I finally pulled the car over to the curb and reached into my pocket. She sat up straight and got all uptight. "What we stopping for?" she says, and I said, "I thought I had a handkerchief, but I guess I don't." I pulled back out on the street. She looked at me for a minute. I kept staring straight ahead, but I could tell she was watching me. And she said, "Thank you." I drove her home. She lived way out on the north side where most of the blacks live. You know where. It's a pretty lousy neighborhood, it's about as bad as mine. As I pulled up in front of her house, I could see a bunch of kids hanging around on her porch and in her yard. Well, here you are, I said, a little nervous. For somebody who'd been practicing in her mind how to get the door open, she was pretty slow about getting out. That's how it seemed to me, anyway. I think she was tired out of from crying so much. Then there was all these black kids around my car. Some big guy opened the girl's door and pulled her out and said, "What's the matter, Connie? What happened?" You can tell she'd been crying. Then they opened my door and dragged me out. It seemed like there was 100 black faces staring at me. I guess it was really just about a dozen, but it seemed like 100. I just stood there, backed up against the car. Talk about scared, man. I was scared. To top it off, that chick had started crying again, so she couldn't talk. Mike paused here for a minute. He was staring off in the distance, and when he started talking again, it was slowly, like he was living the whole thing over again. The big guy came around to my side of the car. "You hurt her, white boy?" "No," I said, and it didn't sound very loud, so I cleared my throat and said, "No, I didn't." So loud that it sounded like I was shouting. It was real quiet. You could hear somebody's TV from down the street and a dog barking a block away and Connie's soft sobbing. I could even hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then the big guy said, really quiet, like, "What if we don't believe you?" And I got so scared I was about to cry and said, "Ask her, huh? Just ask her." The guy called across the car, "Connie, what do you want me to do with this white cat?" And real soft, her voice was so soft, just like her eyes, she said, "Kill the white bastard." And sure enough, they almost did. There was a long silence. I think Mike had forgotten I was listening to him. Then he took a long breath. "That's how I got here. I must be a dumb kid like the old man says, though, because I still don't hate Negroes, least of all Connie. I mean, I can almost see why she did it. Almost." I shook my head. "That's a rotten thing to happen to anybody." "It sure is." Mark's voice came from behind me. He had been standing in the doorway. I don't know how long. "Come on, Brian," he said. "Here's your comics." He tossed a couple of monster comics on the bed. As we got into the elevator, Mark said, "I'm inclined to agree with his old man. That is one stupid guy." "You mean it?" I said. I had been thinking about Mike's story, and I could see his point about not hating the people who beat him up. "Yeah, I mean it. Man, if anybody ever hurt me like that, I'd hate them for the rest of my life." I didn't think much about that statement then, but later I would. I still do. I think about it, and I think about it until I think I'm going crazy.